You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one on one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical, tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com / apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com / apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 934. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. All month, we are talking seven-figure practices. So you may not be there. You may not be even close. Maybe you just got started. It's still awesome to hear from people that were in your shoes, that got started a few years ago, lots of years ago, that are now seven-figure practice owners. And we're digging into all sorts of things around seven-figure practices. Now, maybe you are a seven-figure practice owner. This is for you as well. We're digging into what is it like to be a seven-figure practice owner? Like, what do you think through? How do you figure out when to expand? How do you figure out when you're going to grow? What are all those different things that you need to think through? And as many of you know, during December and January, we have opened up our seven-figure practice club. So our seven-figure practice club is limited to 12 seven-figure practices to be around those people that are at your level. We're going to meet twice a month, starting in February, 90 minutes for the first one, 3 hot seats of 25 minutes each, where you bring a presenting issue and then other seven-figure practice owners just rock it out, tell you what they think about how they would work through it. And then the second meeting is a 60-minute meeting where one of the 12 people will present on something that they feel like they're really knocking out of the park. So it's a chance for you to grow in your public speaking and your leveling up in your consulting, so that if you're really doing something well in your practice, all these other seven-figure practice owners are going to say, oh my gosh, this is the go-to person around this topic. We're also meeting twice a year in person, once here in Traverse City, Michigan, and then another time at a place yet to be determined. So if you want to apply for that seven-figure practice club, just head on over to practiceofthepractice.com / club. You do have to be a seven-figure practice owner to apply. And so we'll have you verify all of that just by a series of questions. We're not going to pull your financials, but we do want to make sure that everyone is a seven-figure practice owner that joins. So today I am so excited to have Laurie Groh back on the podcast. Laurie has been a friend of Practice of Practice for years and owns 2 mental health practices, Shoreside Therapies and Vital Minds, and also has a new podcast, and it is called Wisconsin Wellness. Laurie, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Yeah, well, you've been on the show before. You've been, in our communities and been around. Take us through a little bit of your journey of when you started your practice. And then today we're really talking about when to expand and how you think through that. But we'd love to hear a little bit about your journey first.
Sure. So I think I mentioned this on the other podcast that I got to speak with you on, but I've been a mental health therapist for about 15 years. I met with my partner and he decided, hey, let's partner together. And so we started working together with Shoreside Therapies. At that point, it was just me and him. And we had this really nice office space. And I decided I wanted a bigger office. And so that is why I said to him, we need to hire a therapist. So my start into a group practice was really just about getting a better office at first. At first it was. And then
Real quick, I want to ask about
yeah.
that partnership before we get too far in. A lot of people talk about the pros and cons of having a partnership. How did the two of you structure that partnership at the beginning?
So it probably not the best way to structure it. My husband jokes that we did it on a napkin, but we just talked it through, basically what we were both really good at. And Brandon is an amazing person to network with, to talk with. He's really funny and easy to talk to. I'm more reserved in certain ways where I might not go out and want to talk to every single person I meet. I'd rather just be reading and learning. And so we actually talked a bit about, some of those strengths. He could see that I was really, I guess, creative and wasn't afraid to try something different and new. And I'm always looking for something new. So I think together we made a really good team. Now, the structuring, though, that took some time and a lot of conversations over time. We, to this day, don't have anything concretely written down. However, we do have different roles. He's more in person with the therapist on a day-to-day level. I do more of the back end stuff, such as the SEO, marketing, setting up meetings, and doing billing and insurance issues as well. So we balance each other out pretty nicely.
Hmm. Now, for your own, and we don't have to spend the whole episode talking about your partnership, but I'm just interested because,
Yeah.
so some ways that people do it is like anyone that you see clinically, you keep that money. Anyone he sees clinically, they keep the money, and then everything that's in the practice is split in some way. Like, what's the model that you guys use to kind of split up the money, being partners?
That is exactly the way we do it. We also have separate credit cards we use. So if something is more directed towards me, like if it's something for my office or if it's an educational thing, then I would just put it on my card and then we split everything else, like rent and utilities, things like that. Where it can get tricky is, we might have different ideas of what to spend money on, but in all honesty, maybe it's because we're therapists, I don't know, but we talk about things in a really um, calm and focused on solution type way. I don't know how to say that a little bit better, but we basically listen to each other and decide through series of conversations what makes the most sense. It is not really all that often that we disagree, but when we do, there is now a tendency for him to kind of go along with what I want, which has been really great, just because he's seen some of the things that I was able to do with our practice.
Yeah. Now, how did you know, other than initially when you wanted just a bigger office, what were some of the next kind of big jumps? I know that oftentimes in private
Mhm.
practice, you have really rapid growth in one area and then you kind of plateau for a while and maybe get your operations down, then like rapid growth. That seems to be a trend I see in a lot of the seven-figure practices. What did your growth look like and how did you figure out when and how to expand?
Yeah, and it looked almost identical to how you described. When we first hired our first therapist, it actually didn't really work that well. We were so new at it, so we made a lot of mistakes. Our communication probably wasn't really great. So it was really kind of a slow, bumpy ride for quite a few years. I would say maybe 2 or 3 years. We would find people that would, say that they were interested in the same type of uh, the same mission that we had, or that they aligned with our marketing and how we were doing things, and then just really didn't want to do that part. So that was definitely difficult. I would say right around having 4 therapists, 4 to 5 therapists. I'll be honest, I was kind of um, looking at the finances and wondering, does this make sense? Um, I felt like I was working a lot and not necessarily financially making any more than if I were just to see my typical caseload. So I started to kind of think about, okay, well, what should I do here? Um, and instead of deciding, okay, let's back down and just do my own practice on my own with no therapist, I doubled down basically. Um, Brandon and I decided to hire 3 more people. And with that, it was also pretty scary because we did it pretty much around the same time. Um, but the real thing was deciding, do I want to be all in? I loved the people I was working with. So it wasn't really about that. It was just, is this what I want to be doing with my time? Do I want to divide it up like that? And after thinking a lot about it, I would say probably took me 6 months or so to really wrap my head around the next step. And at that point, I decided, yes, this is what I want to do. I love the balance, and just decided I have to hire more people in order for it to make sense financially.
Mm. Now I know that oftentimes getting to kind of six figures is a big deal for any practice. When you are looking at getting to 500,000, the things that get us to six figures is often bootstrapping it, wearing lots of hats, often
Mhm.
taking on more than maybe what we should, and not outsourcing. And we don't really know what we're doing oftentimes when we're headed towards six figures. But to go from one six figure to multiple six figures, like, you have to start shedding things typically. So what did that look like when you really started to grow from just hitting 100,000 to say 500,000?
Yeah, actually, I owe a lot of it to Practice of the Practice. I was a part of that group for quite some time, and the weekly accountability that was there, and just constantly being told do less, basically, started to sink in a little bit more and more as time went on. And I really do think that that was the main thing that helped me decide, okay, I have to have some additional help. I'm going to have to hire somebody to help me with some of the logistical things. And I just started offloading as much as I could. Um, and then I would take a step back and think, what else could I offload? And so that took actually a few years to really start to not only um, practice it, but also to trust that that process really works. Because for me, um, my friends will probably laugh hearing this, but I do not like to ask for help. It's not one of my strengths. I offer to help. I just don't ask for it. So it was really hard for me to start to do that. And the more that I was doing it, the more I was realizing I don't have to do it all. And I'm not really good at doing it all. Um, and when I started to really take that in is when I started to be able to go to that next step, which was to buy a building with my husband and move most of the practice there. And so that's what I believe helped tremendously, is really focusing in on what I didn't want to do anymore.
Yeah, so when you were looking at buying the building, so you have a business partner for the business, and then it was just you and your
Mhm.
husband that bought the building?
Yeah, so my husband and I were looking for quite some time on a building, just because it starts to get to a point of it feels like you're just burning money, because you're paying for rent, and you know that you're going to be there for years and years. If you're signing a 5-year lease, that's pretty significant. So if you can really encompass the whole building or part of it and have somebody else renting it out, when you start to look at the numbers, it just makes a lot of financial sense to go that route.
Mhm. So so basically your business is then renting from another business that owns the building.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. So when you were thinking about buying the building, I totally get that idea of, you're giving this rent away and, wanting to maybe build some equity. Like, what size did you need the practice to be to start looking at that building idea? Or maybe did you just want to get a building whether or not the practice was thriving?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I mean, I could go on about this story, but it might bore the listeners, but basically we tried to buy the building we were in first. And unfortunately that didn't work out. And so we started just looking and honestly trying to just do the math of, if we bought this building, how many new therapists would I have to have? And we ended up with a building that had 10 offices, which meant that we were going to have to hire at least 6 more people. along the way. Just when we did the math, it didn't have to be all at once, but basically, once again, trying to double the practice, which was extremely scary.
So were you ready to buy the building like before you were able to double the practice, or like take us through kind of what your thought process was with that? Because I can see how if as a family or as kind of separate from the business, you're choosing to get a building, you want to think kind of through that lens of being the landlord, but then when you're
Mhm.
also the one that's leasing from yourself, like, and also having a partner, that seems like you don't want the success of your building to also be tied to the success of your business. So like what ways were you and your husband thinking through that?
Yeah, I mean, so partly in our office space that we were in, we actually had kind of been in a spot of feeling pretty cramped. So we did have at that point um, enough therapists to expand a bit, but not to that degree. But that did help us for a bit because we were making more income at that point to give us, my partner and I, some buffer as far as, okay, when we make this other jump, we're going to have a whole nother mortgage, which is a lot more than what we are paying now. So having that cushion did really help. That is one thing I definitely, going back, I would do the same thing over of making sure that that we were utilizing our office space as much as humanly possible before that jump, before that leap, because that cushion makes a huge difference, especially when you're taking a risk.
Yeah.
Um, and
Did
then
you
did
have
I
a certain
answer
amount that you
all of it, Joe?
um
Did I answer all of your question?
I mean, I guess I'll just keep following my curiosity, like, because you
Yeah.
just said buffer. Did you have in your mind, like, I need to have 3 to 6 months of those expenses set up? We're going to put down 20%, or like, how did you think through the numbers side of it?
Well, that's what my husband was helpful for.
Mhm.
We talked a lot about it. In fact, I think we were talking about it at least a few times a week, every week for quite some time, maybe even a few years of looking at what does that actually look like. And my husband did business banking, so he can quickly tell me what those numbers need to
Mm,
look like.
that's
So
helpful.
I mean, yes, yes, it is. It is good to be married to him for sure. But that's really what we did. We didn't necessarily have it so clearly planned out. The main thing for me, honestly, was, can I cover the basic expenses? If everything goes wrong, can I pay for rent? And can I pay for utilities and the water bill? So if I had that in my mind, I can do this. So really what it came down to is looking at the numbers and then recognizing the reality that if I really needed to, I could work more hours. I could see more clients. I could, you know, go out and market more and more. I could do all those things, but I just had to trust that I, that was going to happen, that I wasn't going to give up.
Yeah. Please don't DIY your accounting. It's like relying on a self help book instead of getting much needed therapy. There's a reason accountants go through tons of schooling and grueling exams like we do. You shouldn't be expected to know all the things that they studied for years. They're experts and can make the whole quarterly tax situation smooth, and honestly, with some planning, pretty painless. You don't want to be surprised by taxes or have the IRS breathing down your neck. And therapists ask me all the time where to find an accountant. Herd is my go to referral for therapists needing bookkeeping, tax preparation, payroll, and all the financial back office stuff. They even help therapists set up a bank account, form a business entity, and open a retirement plan. They work exclusively with therapists and cost way less than the accountant I worked with for years. The deadline to sign up for 2023 tax services with Herd is December 31st, 2023. You can schedule a free consultation at joinherd.com/Joe. That's join, HEARD.com/Joe and get your first month totally free with promo code Joe at checkout. Again, that's joinherd.com/Joe. Now, when you think about then, after you got the building, continuing to grow into a 7-figure practice. Now, I know you have 2 practices. Tell us how you decided to do 2 with 2 different names compared to having one that had 2 locations.
So that is something I've been wanting to do for quite a while. Shoreside Therapies is online and virtual, but I really enjoy the virtual space quite a bit. And I was, I had been thinking about an online practice and something that could be just more my own. Of course, Brandon and I love having Shoreside Therapies together. I asked him, is this okay? Is this going to be a conflict of interest? And he's like, go for it. So, I mean, that just shows you shows you how great he is and how good our relationship is, that he just trusts that I'm not going to be taking business from Shoreside or anything like that. So there was enough separation with the online practice as well. Um, the other, there's a lot of other reasons why I wanted the online practice, and that is, you know, the fact that I can go wherever to do counseling and to meet with my therapist. At some point, I'm going to probably want to just do that, as much as I, again, like having shoreside therapies. There is a bit of that feeling of I have to be physically in that building a few times a week, and we have 2 locations. And so it was sort of like, this is my future plan. At some point, I would love to be 100% virtual. And knowing how long sometimes businesses take to um, move along and create revenue and build, I decided to do it sooner than later, so that in 5 to 10 years, it's going to feel like that would be an option. Not that I'm 100% going to do that option, but that it would be available to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then you also launched a podcast. Tell me about
Yeah.
that.
Well, Joe, I don't think you would remember this, but I took your podcast course, I don't know how many years ago. I took it a long time ago. And I think even in one of our meetings, I was talking about wanting to start a podcast. And this was several years ago. And I was really stuck. And you'd mentioned, what if you what if you call it Wisconsin Wellness, and it's based in Wisconsin? So I don't know if you knew when I said that that's the podcast name. I don't know if you knew that you actually gave me that name. Um, but the podcast has been something I've been wanting to do for quite a while, just because I love talking to individuals about mental health. And one of the coolest things that I get to experience is talking to not just mental health providers, but other wellness providers that share things that I've never heard about. I've never, um, for instance, that I was speaking to a dentist that was talking about how our breathing at night can cause symptoms of ADHD, and that it can be because our mouth sometimes is too small. So I had never heard about that before, and I just became more and more curious about, oh, are there other areas that I don't know about that have to do with wellness and mental health that just aren't really talked about because it's not in my wheelhouse. So I started to kind of think about that for quite a while. And finally, I just decided I just got to do it. Who cares if no one listens? I just have to do it. I mean, I want
Yeah,
people to listen.
yeah, of course. And I think that's one of those things that we sometimes overthink it. And then also just the value in getting started where you're getting to interview people and grow your skill set.
Right, right. And that's the thing too, is I am going to measure my success in the fact of, what am I getting out of this? Does it need to be a million listeners? And it doesn't. It just needs to be those conversations, and hopefully some people are listening and getting something out of it. And I think before, what was holding me back was thinking that my podcast needed to be something bigger than that. And, and not to say that I can't dream big, but I had to really shift what I was expecting and what I was going to do so that I didn't feel like if I don't have 1,000 listeners or subscribers in the end of the month, that I'm a failure. I had to really shift how that looked for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that just understanding how long it takes to really get a solid listening base. I mean, I would say it takes typically about 50 episodes before you get a really solid listening base. And for most people to launch their first products, it's usually about 100 episodes. And so you figure if you're just doing weekly, that's 2 years, and that's a long
Yeah.
time to commit to something, for that time. For you, I want to go back to the practice. So, as a seven-figure practice owner, what challenges do you have that you didn't have before? So, as a seven-figure practice owner, how is that different from a challenge standpoint compared to when less revenue was coming in?
Hmm. So I would say it would be the differences have to do more with what I'm going to be spending my time on, honestly. Now I spend more time thinking about marketing and how to create more and more networking opportunities for the therapists. Um, what is nice though is that all of our therapists have really great connections and do the work. But I would say the biggest challenge difference is keeping and making sure that the therapists are happy. Not that I wasn't doing that before, but I just really recognize and realize that the therapists are the reason we're doing well. And keeping that in the forefront of my mind is really, really important. And so that means spending more time thinking about what they might want, what they might need, offering more supervision, offering different, um, it could be different outings, or letting a therapist use my lake house, things like that, um, where I wasn't really able to fully understand and see that prior, because I think I was just so in the weeds of the day to day. So now the challenges are how to keep things, pretty much how to keep things as good as they are right now.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's really smart to know when you're intentionally plateauing versus intentionally growing. Like, even looking at the last 18 months, we have invested heavily in operations and systems and really trying to find those cracks that need to be filled before we add more pressure to it. And now we're at the point that we're kind of exiting as much of that intentional operational building into more intentional growth. Putting a lot more into pay-per-click advertising or things like that, so that we can grow. But it's only because we were able to build those operations and hopefully clean up those cracks that if we grow significantly over the next year, that it's not going to break the system or break the staff, or people aren't going to be pissed off and things like that. So I think that's so smart to say. Right now, it's like just sustaining, keeping things going how it is. That's a great way of looking at it. Laurie, the last question I always ask
Yeah.
is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Well, I think really just recognizing that you can do this. It just takes time and it takes consistency. And that's real. And I was told that many times before, but just really taking that in, that if you continue to put that work in and you continue to build different networks and different relationships, it just builds upon itself. And just trusting that all of that work is going to benefit you in the long run. Um, Also, just reminding yourself that you got this, you can do it. It doesn't take the most intelligent person in the world to be able to run a successful practice. It just takes, I think, a big heart and a good communication skills with your therapist. And like myself, having a good partner that I can rely on makes a huge difference.
Mm. So awesome. Well, if people want to listen to the podcast, if they want to connect with you and your work, where's the best place to send them?
I think right now, vitalmindscounseling.com is the best place because I do have some free webinars through there, as well as some free downloads. And then you can get all the information that you might need about the podcast and how to reach out to me.
Oh, so awesome. Well, Laurie, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for everything.
As we get applications in for this 7-figure practice club, some of the things people are saying are, as you grow, there's more responsibility, or I want to develop those alongside myself to build a leadership team, or this is the long game. I mean, kind of what Laurie was saying, this is the long game. Some of the questions people are asking is like, what is a good size for us? How do I let someone go when they aren't producing, and how to do that clinically and ethically? When do I get another location? I want time for mindset development. All these things are things that 7-figure practice owners are telling us on the regular basis about what they want to do. So if you are a 7-figure practice owner, I would love for you to apply over at practiceofthepractice.com/club. This is going to be a 12-person club of people that we get together every single month talking through 7-figure practices. We meet up twice a year, and you're also going to get full access to all of our membership communities as well if there's extra things that you need access to. So again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/club if you want to apply for that. Those applications close at the end of January, so just make sure that you get that application in soon. Also, we could not do this show without our amazing sponsors. Herd is our sponsor. It's never too early to start thinking about tax season, and that's why I partnered with my friends over at Herd. They have been a long-term sponsor, and we have so many of our members that use them for their tax deductions, quarterly payments, figuring out spreadsheets, and all those things that honestly, I don't want to have to worry about. I don't want to have to worry about the money. Herd takes care of it all. So you can focus on your clients, and Herd does the rest. Sign up for a free consultation call today over at joinherd.com/Joe. Again, that's joinherd.com/Joe, and also get 1 month free with promo code Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.